Tonight on Nova, giant airships like this once ruled the skies. They were the first to drop bombs on a city and the first passenger aircraft. Speed and a comfortable ride made them the ocean liners of the sky. But a number of well-publicized crashes ended their reign. Some never gave up on the airship, and today there is a small renaissance for these machines.
Isn't it great? Oh, brother, it's fantastic and great to it.
The Blimp is back.
Oh, God.
Funding for Nova is provided by the Johnson & Johnson family of companies, supplying healthcare products worldwide. And Lockheed, a bold new force in systems engineering, management, and technology services for defense, space, and industry. Major funding for Nova is provided by the financial support of viewers like you. Anyone who has seen the Goodyear Blimp can appreciate why people might build these graceful and most capricious of aircraft, lighter than air machines. This familiar craft, small as airships go, is but a relic of the giant dirigibles that once dominated the skies. Years before planes carried anyone but a pilot and crew, airships like this transported paying passengers. By the late 1920s, airships were more comfortable and faster than steamships. But their vast size made them hard to handle, and accidents were all too frequent. For many, the crash of the Hindenburg in 1937 confirmed that something was fundamentally wrong with them, and enthusiasm waned. Today, more than 50 years later, interest in these most romantic of flying machines appears to be growing again. Are the designers of these modern dirigibles visionaries, anticipating some new age for the airship, or hopeless romantics, ignoring the lessons of the past? With lighter than air, it seems that the dream never dies. Two Frenchmen first floated free of the earth in a balloon in 1783. But for more than 100 years, these balloons flew at the whim of the wind. Then, at the turn of the century, Alberto Santos Dumont, a young Brazilian living in Paris, took the first important step in powering and steering balloons. Santos attached a propeller to his motorcycle engine and slung it under a silk balloon. He filled the balloon with hydrogen lifting gas. As the airship rose, the outside air pressure decreased, allowing the hydrogen gas to completely fill the balloon. On returning to Earth, the hydrogen contracted again. The drop in internal gas pressure nearly ended Santos's flying career. To stop the airship from folding in two, Santos pumped air into an inner balloon called a ballonnet. As the airship rose and the hydrogen expanded, he released air from the ballonnet to maintain internal pressure. On the way down, re-inflating the ballonnet kept the pressure up and the balloon firm. Although Santos built the first true dirigible, literally a steerable balloon, he saw no commercial future for his tiny one-person airships. To propel a dirigible balloon through the air, he once remarked, is like pushing a candle through a brick wall. In Germany, an ex-cavalry officer, Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin, took the next step in airship design. Instead of limp fabric bags made firm by the pressure of the gas within, Zeppelin's airships were truly rigid. Zeppelin filled a lightweight aluminum framework with 17 separate hydrogen bags. The skeleton was then covered with canvas to create a streamlined hull. Hydrogen-filled airships controlled their buoyancy by carrying water ballast. To make them lighter, water is released, while releasing gas makes the airship sink. Zeppelin's designs were known as rigid airships. The first Zeppelin flew on July 2nd, 1900. The city-block-long rigid airship was initially so overweight and underpowered that it could barely carry the Count and 3 assistants at 8 miles an hour. But the Count refused to give up his dream. He began building Zeppelins to take passengers on sightseeing excursions. The Count became a national hero. He finally developed a Zeppelin that flew almost 50 miles an hour. The German War Ministry was impressed. The aging Count was overjoyed. Instead of passengers, Zeppelins would now carry bombs. Early in 1915, Germany began the first campaign to bomb a nation into submission, and Britain was the target. Although property damage was only scattered, the psychological impact of the raids was devastating. But the hydrogen-filled Zeppelins were vulnerable targets, and Germany lost 79 of her 123 airships. After the war, the U.S. Navy ordered an airship from the Zeppelin Company. She was delivered to the United States in 1924 and christened the Los Angeles. One of her officers was George Watson.
And it was built, we always understood from the Germans, with loving hands, because they felt this might be their last airship and it was going to be the best one ever built. And those of us who flew on the Los Angeles quite agreed with them. It was the best one they ever built. It was a wonderful ship, and everything about it was good. And I think it is true that they put a lot of their emotions and their skill into building little Hawaii. So she had life, and one of the few airships that died in bed.
On arrival, the hydrogen in the Los Angeles was replaced by helium. Helium has less lifting power than hydrogen, but it has the great advantage of not exploding. Helium was found underground in Texas, and the United States had a monopoly on helium production. The Los Angeles gave the Navy a chance to experiment, To see if an airship could operate from an aircraft carrier, the Los Angeles was ordered to land on the Saratoga off the coast of Rhode Island.
And as they brought us down on a carrier, why, we discovered the carrier deck was rising and falling some 20 or 30 feet. So as we would be coming down, the carrier deck would be coming up, and we would hit with an awful crash. So this happened 4 or 5 times in quick succession. And we were battering the bottom out of the control car there. Rosendahl let go about 2,000 pounds of water ballast right on the Saratoga ground crew, and this made us pretty highly unwelcome to ever come back again.
The experience gained for the Los Angeles encouraged the Navy to try and take the lead in airship development. The Navy contracted the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company of Akron, Ohio, to build 2 state-of-the-art airships, the Akron and the Macon. The Akron contained 8 million cubic feet of helium. It was over 2 football fields in length. The 8 inboard engines could cruise at 70 miles an hour for up to 75 hours. To compensate for weight lost from burning off fuel, water was recovered from the engine exhausts. In 1931, there were great expectations for the new airships.
At that time, you have to remember that the Navy badly needed some surveillance of the really broad ocean areas. The carriers were not ready yet to provide this. They just sort of started off. The seaplanes didn't have the legs to do it with. It was really a device that was badly needed.
The Akron and the Macon were flying aircraft carriers with room for 5 planes inside their hulls.
And the idea is these planes, there would be 4 of them out at one time, 2 on each side of the airship, 100 miles apart. So you were sweeping a 400-mile width area as you went along. And of course, this greatly extended the amount of area you could cover in surveillance.
But the Akron seemed ill-fated. A well-publicized accident showed how difficult it was to land a huge, buoyant airship, even with the help of over 200 sailors.
In 1932, while she was attempting to moor, a gust of wind swept her skyward so suddenly that 3 men of her ground crew were pulled high into the air. The grip of one man loosened, and he fell to his death. The second man followed him to destruction, but the third crewman hung on and was safe.
It was a grand and glorious feeling to get inside once more.
During a visit by government observers, the Akron crushed her fin, causing further embarrassment to the Navy. Before they could prove their worth as long-distance scouts, both airships were sunk in storms at sea. The loss of the Akron and Macon ended American ambitions to build giant, rigid airships. Back in Germany, the Zeppelin Company was enjoying great success with its passenger-carrying airship, the Graf Zeppelin. The accommodations were more comfortable than on any earlier airship. There were 10 staterooms for 20 passengers, all with windows that could open on a world just a few hundred feet below. Food and service were first class. As one satisfied passenger commented, "On a plane you fly, but on the Graf you voyage." The Graf offered the first transatlantic flights to New York and Rio. The driving force behind the Zeppelin Company was Hugo Echner.
We had a wonderful flight in a rocker time of about 50 hours from coast to coast. That is nearly half the time the fastest steamers need. I admit we had to make the flight under very favorable weather conditions, but I am convinced under all weather conditions, even on the most unfavorable, we will be able to make the flight in all regularity and safety. Thank you.
By 1935, Eckner's plans to build the world's largest and most luxurious commercial airship were nearing completion. The 16 gas bags were to be filled with helium, purchased from the United States. But huge construction costs forced the Zeppelin company to forfeit control to the German government. The United States, fearing that the Nazis would use the new airship for military purposes, refused to export any helium. So the Hindenburg was filled with hydrogen. The first flight of the 1937 flying season offered 50 passengers the fastest and most comfortable means of crossing the Atlantic. One of the Hindenburg's crew was Richard Kalmer.
Eine Luftschifffahrt mit dem Hindenburg, das war eine
The trip on the Hindenburg was a wonderful experience. The food was excellent. Even the crew ate the same meals as the paying passengers. Unlike travel by boat, airship passengers never became seasick. This was an important consideration for travelers when choosing between a steamer or an airship. The chairs and tables were not fixed to the floor. You could place a glass of water on a table without it moving. This was the real proof of how smooth it was to fly on an airship.
A large crowd had assembled in Lakehurst, New Jersey to greet the Hindenburg's arrival on May 6, 1937. There were news cameramen. Radio reporter Herb Morrison was covering the event live.
It's practically standing still now. They've dropped ropes out of the nose of the ship. It's been taken a hold of down on the field by a number of men. The back motors of the ship are just holding it just enough to keep it from... It bursts into flames. And it's crashing. Oh, it's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now, and the frame is crashing to the ground. All the humanity and all the fans.
I was the first out and ran for the fire department. I think I set a world record running the 100 meters. It was high time to get out of there. Shortly afterwards, the whole ship began to collapse, and I would certainly have been injured or killed. In 1 minute, the whole ship was totally destroyed.
It was never discovered what caused the hydrogen to explode. Amazingly, only 35 of the 97 people on board were killed, the only passenger losses that ever occurred on a Zeppelin. But these newsreel images shown around the world spelled the end of the giant passenger-carrying airship.
It's the greatest of miracles that anyone came out of the disaster alive.
The future of the airship would be the Blimp, and the Blimp would be filled with helium, not hydrogen. Blimps have no rigid skeleton. They're simply gas-filled balloons. In 1940, when Hitler's U-boats started torpedoing merchant ships off America's east coast, U.S. Navy blimps came to the rescue.
U-boats, of course, in World War II were primarily surface raiders. they had the capability of submerging, and to come up and reveal themselves to a blimp would have been disastrous, and that the blimps did have a pretty good staying power, and we could stay with them for a long time, surfaced or submerged, and call in other forces who could then destroy them. And I think they knew this.
Blimps were such an effective U-boat deterrent that no ship was ever torpedoed while under their protection. The Navy built up to a fleet of 119 airships. After the war, numbers dropped off rapidly. Goodyear and the Navy did develop this mammoth radar-carrying blimp in 1959 for detecting Soviet bombers. But by then, interest in airships was on the wane.
An airship program in the U.S. Navy back in 1961, when the decision was made to get rid of airships, the airship program was essentially costing the Navy one aircraft carrier and one air wing. And when it came down to a money crunch and they had to make a hard decision, they said, we want the aircraft carrier and the air wing, and we'll do away with airships. Perhaps it was a good decision, perhaps it was not. Those who love lighter than air, of course, think it was a lousy decision.
One of the little tricks we've got to be careful about is when all this, before helium inflation, they have to bring all this lot down and evacuate all the air out with a pump. And therefore, this whole lot...
Roger Monk is one of those people who loves lighter than air.
When it inflates with helium...
2 decades after Goodyear built its last blimp for the U.S. Navy, Monk decided to resurrect the airship idea. Today, he is making a final check inside the bag of his 15th blimp.
I thought there was no point in producing anything that was the same as Goodyear, because, I mean, they've been doing it for longer, and therefore, so we tried to lead them in technology. So we decided we would put in all the technological advances that we could do, like vectored thrust, like composite materials. In any case, I was more conversant with those.
A youthful Roger Monk began his struggle to build a high-tech airship in Cardington, England, more than a decade ago.
There's as much difference between our design and the airships of the 1930s as between, you know, a 747 and the airplanes of the 1930s. You know, a lot of advances have been made, and they have made airplanes safer. And by using those same materials and technologies and design ideas on airships, we hope to make the airship safer and to be more productive. The whole gondola...
To improve control of the airship during landing and takeoff, Monk is determined to incorporate a major innovation in blimp design, swiveling propellers.
Engines positioned inside the gondola, and we have, this is a model of the propulsor duct. When the ship is taking off and it's full of fuel and heavy, the propulsor is rotated round into the vertical position, so we just drive the ship up away from the ground.
Vertically?
Yeah. It's because it's used in Harrier. They deflect the thrust downwards.
The vectored thrust propulsion system is the most complicated part of the airship. Monk's backers are urging him to abandon this refinement because the project is already behind schedule.
Okay, can you pull me that way and up a bit and pull me that way? Up about. It's been, you know, 2 years of absolute sheer hell, really. I mean, 90 hours a week. And also, I mean, we're sort of, you know, we're a long way behind time and a long way over budget. And, you know, bank managers and what have you get a little bit harassed. And there's a pretty small margin for error over this last few days. I mean, if it didn't go absolutely like clockwork, you know, the whole thing could have gone down the pan.
What a day, though, to bring her up to the front of the house.
When the airship is finally ready to fly, the weather turns bad. Monk is at a crisis. His backers are giving him an ultimatum: fly within a week or we're pulling out. On the appointed day, test pilot Giovanni Abrati decides to postpone the maiden flight because he feels the wind is still too strong.
They weren't getting 10 knots out there. Bastards. Right, isn't it? They weren't getting 10 knots out there. Ron says he's happy. That's a bloody baloney crap about, you know, we won't get any lulls because the sun's coming up.
It's constant. 15 up there, which I said it would be less.
Let's get Jim. Can you know, it's going out in any case, whatever. I'll take responsibility for the bloody thing. Is everyone ready? We're going, I think. I have to get a move on because the wind's going to get up again shortly. They've got a strong wind warning, though, coming up, so if we don't get it out in a minute, Get it out there, up to the... Let's move it, otherwise we'll miss the next bloody lull. Oh, God, I mean, we could have gone at 8. He said, oh, well, it won't drop down. Of course, it did do for half an hour. Now it's picked up again. You've got to be on there and ready to go. Don't be too pedantic about it, Giovanni. Through!
Now the sun is setting. If we don't move now, we're never going to do it. We have to hurry, yeah?
OK.
Slack the line! Slack the line! Hands off!
Oh, brother, it's fantastic and great twit. Oh, God. What a thing, though, isn't it? Isn't it? Oh.
After a successful 20-minute flight, Monk is ecstatic.
How was that for a takeoff? Incredible.
How did it feel?
A bit hairy towards the end. The landing was a bit... If we hadn't had that vector thrust, did you see it cut? We were coming down like a, well, bloody train.
Like a stone. Proves the point, though, anyway.
But 6 weeks later, in a rising gale, Monk is caught trying to stuff the airship back in the hangar. It's a casebook disaster. Most airship losses occur in strong winds on the mast or during attempts to get in and out of the hangar.
Well, some silly sod somewhere, I suppose, they're going to have to put the whole lot back together again. At the moment, I don't really feel like it being me.
We were in such a hole that the only way of getting out of it was going on. I was very ill for about 6 months after that. Anyway, got out of that. We reformed.
With new backers, Monk established Airship Industries, and 10 years later, he's still building airships. His sophisticated blimps were built with the military in mind, but most have ended up in advertising. Monk's blimps are expensive. This one sells for $5.5 million, or it can be leased for $3.6 million a year. So far, sales and leases for advertising have not made a profit for Airship Industries. Monk always believed the right role for his blimps was surveillance, but only the Japanese and Korean police have bought them. In July of 1989, the Paris police were concerned about 2 major events that were to take place simultaneously in the city. The 200th anniversary of the French Revolution. And an economic summit attended by the heads of state of the 7 leading industrialized nations. The Paris police mounted a huge security operation under the all-seeing eye of one of Monk's blimps. The blimp was equipped with a powerful camera that could identify a person at over a mile. And there was an infrared camera for guarding Paris airspace at night. The blimp was aloft for 22 hours a day for 7 consecutive days. Pictures were relayed to police headquarters. For years, the Paris police have had cameras at ground level for monitoring traffic. a blimp was the ideal vehicle to give them an additional bird's-eye view of the city. Chief of Security, Raymond de Mathias.
We have helicopters, like police everywhere in the world, but for this security operation, they were not an appropriate choice. Helicopters are very noisy, and Parisians are very sensitive about aircraft noise, which is why no planes are allowed to fly over Paris. We were pleasantly surprised that Parisians immediately adopted the blimp, which they nicknamed the Whale.
Ou alors TD1 dès maintenant, contrôle de l'itinéraire emprunté par les personnalités, le tronc commun. Votre position actuelle, TD1, votre position actuelle.
The blimp trailed President Bush as he traveled across the city, allowing the police to anticipate any potential problems en route to his meeting at the Louvre.
Attente. Bon, TD1 de TNZ1, TD1. Bon, TD1, arrivée de la personnalité à la pyramide, RAS, excellente progression. Bon, alors TD1, dès maintenant, vous assurez l'itinéraire retour de la personnalité depuis le point de départ en direction de la résidence. Dans quelques instants, vous nous faites ça?
The Paris surveillance operation was a success, but it did not lead to a sale. Monk is hoping that a contract with the U.S. Navy to build a much larger blimp will improve the company's prospects. The Navy is interested in a blimp that could help protect its fleet from the kind of missile attack that damaged the Stark in the Persian Gulf. Radar on board only gives the commander a few seconds to shoot down incoming missiles. To gain more warning of an attack, the Navy uses planes or helicopters to carry radar aloft. But keeping them constantly in the air is very costly. As sea-skimming missiles get smaller and faster, the size of the radar antenna needed to detect them gets larger. The Navy concluded that the only vehicle that could keep a billboard-sized radar aloft for weeks at a time is a very large blimp. Today, Monk takes the Navy review team through a full-size mock-up of the cabin. He has to convince them he has a viable design for building the world's biggest blimp.
We're not talking about an aeroplane that's going to be up for a few hours. We're talking about a vehicle that's going to be up there for 30 days, refueling 2 to 3 day intervals, but they've got to be in there for 30 days, and this thing's got to be sufficiently habitable, so you don't need a crew of Superman to keep at reasonable efficiency. What we find is, in the light of an air game, that people find it incredibly difficult to visualize airships. They instantly imagine sort of wicker baskets and sort of canvas envelopes creaking across the sky. And you basically have to do this to make people realize that it is an advanced technology product and just as capable as any other airplane.
Yeah, I think we could get away with pulling these down even a little bit more. I'm not sure what would happen with the computer panel here.
I think the one thing that we do have is massive sticking power and a massive determination to make it work, and I think the Navy actually recognised that. And we're just going to keep pounding away until we get this thing into the air.
But Monk's going to need all his determination, because in an old wartime airship hangar in Tillamook, Oregon, a contender is putting the final touches to his new blimp.
It's taken 2.5 years to get to the point of having a production version airship. An airship that somebody wants to buy, that we've built, the FAA wants to certify it, and we've got it here finally inflated. It's kind of a birthing process after all this time. Okay, these cables, the cables on the side line up with the patches, and there should be about 6 inches of overlap. So, whoa! Chris!
Thiel founded the American Blimp Corporation when he felt that Monk's blimps were too expensive for many potential advertisers. Although by volume, Thiel's is a quarter the size of Airship Industries, it carries almost half the passenger load. Thiel kept the empty weight of the blimp to a minimum by creating a very simple design.
They're loose.
Like the early blimp designers, Thiel put the cables that suspend the cabin on the outside of the gas bag. An external suspension system is easy to assemble and maintain once the cables are the right length.
And these cables are supposed to come to a point in space, which they do. Unfortunately, it appears to be the wrong point. The cables are designed with what's called a short leg, so that just for this purpose, that if the balloon would stretch with age, or for any reason you'd need to change the length of the cable, you can just work with this short end of the cable. So what we're trying to determine now is if we actually have the parts with us to make up new short legs at the moment. And I guess the answer is yes.
Thiel's most important innovation is the design of the envelope. Conventional fabric has to combine both strength and impermeability to gas. Thiel uses two bags. The transparent material on the right contains the helium, while the outer red fabric is the weight-bearing hull. The result is a very lightweight, translucent envelope. The bags are easily changed. Just before the blimp was delivered to Arizona, Thiel's first customer, Virgin Lightships, decided on a lily-white envelope.
Making airships profitable is like making any business profitable. You really have to focus in on what the customer wants and what he's willing to pay for. And I think in case of airship advertising, he's paying for corporate recognition. And he doesn't want an overly big airship. He's not impressed with all the details of performance that as designers we get so enamored with. He needs a Mack truck of a blimp to be there reliably doing what he wants, and that's what we've tried to do here.
The A-60 Lightship will sell for about $1.25 million, about 1/4 the cost of Roger Monk's airship. Operating it will cost around $100,000 a month.
We're getting ready for the first flight of our A-60 after reinflation with the new envelope. Yeah, there's always a few butterflies the very first flight of a new aircraft, you bet.
With a banner on there, it'll really look super.
Yeah.
You know, it does have a quieter sound.
Doesn't it sound good?
Yeah, it sounds a lot better, doesn't it?
But the best part about it is it really has some kick when you, for acceleration.
Dick Whitcomb is an ex-Navy and Goodyear blimp pilot who was Thiel's mentor throughout the development of the Lightship.
It's not infrequent that people will assume that they have the capabilities to build airships. I think they're graceful, they're lighter than air, they seem simple. And yet, in fact, those same people would not sit around and propose to build helicopters. And I'm not sure what it is about airships that makes people feel qualified at the drop of a hat to be experts. One of the major costs in operating an airship is the crew, and particularly when you're traveling on the road. The per diem and hotel costs can become enormous. Conventional airships operate with crews between 20 and 25. What we've tried to do with the Lightship is minimize the amount of crew, and we've done that partially by minimizing the size, but also by trying to make the maintenance as simple as possible and to make it as field-ready as possible.
Well, how did you like it?
As expected, went flawlessly.
Pardon?
Real nice flight.
Switches off?
All switches are off.
Glad to have you back on the ground, safe and sound.
Thank you.
Well, at this point, my single biggest priority is to orchestrate putting this airship into production, not just build one, but to actually deliver 4 or 5 in the balance of this year. And we really have our work cut out to do that. So right now, we've frozen the design. We want to stabilize what we're doing and simply put it into production. There literally was a day during the walk on the beach that the idea just hit. Let's put a light bulb in there and light it up.
Before Thiel can finalize any sales, he has to get his design approved by the Federal Aviation Administration, a long and expensive task that has dashed the dreams of many fledgling airship entrepreneurs. Back in Tillamook, Oregon, another company, coincidentally using the same hangar, has worked 7 years to develop a strange-looking machine called the cyclocrane. The cyclocrane is designed to transport heavy loads. It was initially funded by a group of Canadian logging companies and the U.S. Forest Service, who wanted an aerial crane to carry logs out of inaccessible forests where roads didn't exist. The designers claim that the cyclocrane will eventually carry twice the load of a helicopter at a quarter of the cost.
Flies just like a helicopter, and it's very easy to fly. An old man like me could fly it because it reacts very slow, but it's extremely stable. Flies very well.
Money for the project runs out in a week. In an effort to keep the cyclocrane alive, the company has invited potential buyers from the Navy, World Bank, and the Canadian government to witness today's flight.
For us, it's a do or die. Not that we will do anything dangerous. I want to make sure Mrs. Morris has a husband at home. Nah, she looks good. As soon as that cab gets hooked up, we'll go.
J.J. Morris's precarious-looking perch for flying the cyclocrane is the modified helicopter cab sitting on top of the tractor. This is how the 2-ton prototype works. There is enough helium in the bag to lift the cyclocrane, the suspended pilot's cab, and 50% of the weight of the payload. When the pilot starts rotating the cyclocrane, air passes over the red airfoils, which act like the wings of an airplane and provide the aerodynamic lift for a 2-ton load. When the payload is dropped, the helium immediately lifts the cyclocrane skywards. The pilot then adjusts the red wings to fly downwards against the lift of the helium. Today, as the cyclocrane prepares for the test flight, a suspension cable chafes against the nose assembly,
Tell them to get the APU plug.
causing an electrical fire. This is yet another incident in a whole series of problems that have been brought on by the rush to get the cyclocrane flying before funding runs out next week.
Well, I just want an electrician to look at it first, and then we'll make a decision what to do. We'll probably have to fix it and roll tomorrow.
I wouldn't want you to fly it the way it is.
Oh, no.
It takes the rest of the day to repair the damage. Next morning's pre-flight check uncovers a bug in the flight control system. Takeoff is postponed until the afternoon, by which time most of the VIPs will have left. In the afternoon, the cyclocrane is back on the runway, ready for its first flight in almost 5 years. As JJ attempts to ease the cyclocrane off the tractor, it's clear that something is seriously wrong.
Calm down. She's coming back up. Calm down.
It appears that yesterday's fire did more damage to the flight control system than was previously thought.
Just shut everything down right there, and she came right on by.
Well, that saved her because she was
Yeah.
heading for disaster.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that's the beauty of this beast, is you can get
It's the absolute beauty of the beast.
Back here, he agreed with negative blade, but he couldn't see anything else.
This is the cyclocrane in 1984 when it made several successful flights. In the air, its ingenious design gives the cyclocrane helicopter-like maneuverability. But just how feasible it would be to operate and maintain in an inaccessible logging location is far from clear. In 1986, the U.S. Forest Service funded another attempt to produce a heavy-lift airship for transporting timber. The Helestat, designed by helicopter designer Frank Piasecki. Piasecki attached 4 surplus helicopters to a surplus Navy Blimp envelope. The helium provides the lift to get the weight of the Helestat itself off the ground, while the helicopter rotors lift a 25-ton payload. During hover tests, wind began to blow the Helestat off the runway. As the structure began vibrating, the pilot tried to fly the Helestat out of trouble. One of the 4 pilots was killed, and work on this marriage of helicopter and blimp was not continued. But the idea of an airship as an aerial crane is not dead.
Adrienne, c'est bon ça? You see the flower? Around there is a great tree.
Here in French Guiana, another attempt to use an airship as an aerial crane is about to start. The world's biggest hot air dirigible was built by a British company, Thunder & Colt. The large volume is needed to lift this 1-ton raft that will allow a French-led team of biologists to work on the very tops of the trees. The buoyancy of a hot air dirigible is adjusted by turning on the burner inside the airbag. More heat gives more lift. No ballast is used. Up till now, most research was conducted at ground level, biologically the least interesting part of the rainforest. But this gives researchers a new tool to explore the canopy.
Given its maneuverability, it can choose exactly the site on which to deposit the raft. If necessary, it could return to that same site a month later, a year later, even 5 years later, to give a continuity of scientific data. The main feature of interest for us at the canopy is its hitherto inaccessibility. People have been trying all sorts of methods to get to the top of the trees, and it's at the top of the trees where all the activity is taking place, or most of the activity. It's flowering, fruiting, that's where all the leaves are, the insect life, the animal life is mostly confined to the tops of the canopy.
But hot air dirigibles have their limitations. Because the air in the bag is under such low pressure, the airship cannot make any headway in winds of more than 5 miles an hour. Flights can only be made early in the day or at night. Tonight, some members of the team are trawling for insects. A net is suspended underneath the gondola.
On a trop de relief pour être trop près. Surtout dans ce coin-là où il y a 3 montagnes. Là.
Oh!
On descend, là.
Alors là c'est l'événement, c'est le premier insecte capturé depuis la nacelle.
Là, la brume, c'est un petit. Oh, le chalut va toucher, là. Merde, des insectes dans la vie.
Unlike a helicopter, the airship can float along without a destructive downdraft.
Oh là, le chalut. Le chalut. C'est bon, il est passé.
Ah. Qu'est-ce que c'est? Qu'est-ce que c'est?
During the night, the raft has slipped, but the team decides to continue working. In order to unload an electrical generator, the dirigible is tied to the raft. The additional weight causes the raft to fold in two. It is undamaged, but wedged between the trees 100 feet off the ground.
D'ailleurs, ça craque par là-bas. Je pense qu'il faut faire quelque chose. Attends, Gérard, éventuellement, ne va pas là, c'est en train de se rabattre, là. Attention. Voilà. Ça tourne encore, j'y vais.
Bougez pas trop, là.
Attention à la caméra, là.
The success of the expedition depends on the airship's ability to extract the raft. But will the dirigible have enough lift? This will be its first real test. The rescue is postponed until early the following morning. The airship must recover the raft quickly. As the tropical sun warms the ambient air, the difference in temperature between the air inside and outside the bag is reduced. And as the temperature difference is reduced, so is the airship's ability to lift the raft.
Ça y est, c'est parti, le radeau est libéré.
Bon, eh ben, on vous attend, on fait chauffer le café.
I would have thought it had a great future, I really do. I mean, it's the best way by far so far to get to the tops of the trees.
So perhaps, after all, there is a future for the airship in a few specialized applications. But Goodyear won't be a part of building this future. In 1987, when Goodyear was developing its first new airship in 30 years, the company was forced to sell the aerospace division to defend itself from a hostile takeover bid. This airship ended Goodyear's 75-year tradition of airship construction. 1 month before Roger Monk's latest airship was due to fly, Airship Industries UK collapsed under debts approaching $100 million. Despite this setback, Monk remains optimistic that the giant blimp he designed for the Navy will fly in 1994. In Tillamook, the cyclocrane has become a hangar queen.
Amazing. That's unbelievable.
But all may not be lost. A major amusement park operator is looking at the cyclocrane as an aerial attraction. Of all the recent efforts to revive interest in airships, Jim Thiel's appears most likely to succeed commercially. His design was finally certified by the FAA, and Thiel has now sold several airships for advertising. But the best hope for the airship is the enthusiasm that it generates in its supporters, who continue to create these wonderful machines that are lighter than air. Funding for NOVA is provided by Lockheed, a bold new force in systems engineering, management, and technology services for defense, space, and industry. And the Johnson & Johnson family of companies, supplying healthcare products worldwide. Major funding for NOVA is provided by the financial support of viewers like you. For a transcript of this program, send $5 to this address or call 212-227-READ.
This is PBS. Next time on NOVA. The Northern California earthquake of 1989 was the most expensive natural disaster in United States history. The proliferation of video equipment made it the most watched. It was also expected. The effort to predict earthquakes is a roller coaster ride filled with stunning revelations and catastrophic failures. When can we expect another earthquake? That's next time on NOVA. For information on obtaining a home video of the program you just watched or others in the NOVA Home Video Library, please call 1-800-523-5503.